Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Destroyed a Tow Company with One Simple Phone Call. Several years back I went to work for a towing company. It's about all I know how to do other than paint cars, which is drastically affecting my health. The pay was pretty decent, but we had to share trucks and the boss felt that he knew where we needed to sit in order to get the best calls. This is important for later. Several months in, I realized that I was not making the type of money that I should be making. So I took the opportunity while I was sitting in a parking lot one evening to start researching the laws pertaining to employees in similar positions. He was kind of a butthole, and the trucks had transponders so that he could see if we had them idling with the air conditioner on a hot day, or idling with the heat on a cold day. He was always calling complaining about something if the wheels were not turning. During my research I discovered that if he was requiring us to sit in a certain parking lot, street, or any location of his choosing, then we were entitled to be paid an hourly wage, not just our commission. The technical term was engaged to wait. However, if he allowed us to freely roam about while we waited for calls, we were not entitled to hourly wages and we were therefore considered waiting to be engaged. I never mentioned this to him, but I did start taking note of my time. Another month or so goes by and he decided to start coming down on me for tiny little things that ordinarily wouldn't even matter, such as I forgot a pop can in the cup holder. He actually had a screaming fit about that. At this point I was tired of working there and had already found another job, so I decided it was time to put my plan into motion. I called him up, told him that we needed to have a conversation about my final wages and that we could meet at his convenience. Upon entering the office I laid out my argument, explained the state law, and told him I expected to be paid for the hours that I was on the clock but not freely allowed to roam looking for work or able to do things of my choosing. He told me in no uncertain terms would not be paid for that time, as that was agreed to upon my employment. I did not bother to argue, as I already had my next step planned, so I took my final check and I left. The following Monday, I made a phone call to the State Labor Board, where I laid out my case to them. Needless to say, they were very interested in what was going on. In the end, they came to review his employment records and speak to the drivers still working. When he got the bill of what he had to pay us all, it was too much for him to afford. So he sold the trucks, his boat, and lot and went out of business. I never got the money owed to me in full, only a fraction. But the satisfaction of knowing the law just a little bit better than he did and watching it all burn was pure bliss. The next one is titled, Insult Me, Rip Me Off? It'll cost you in the long run. A couple of decades ago, mid-80s, I had occasion to need body work done on my car. Kid in the lane to my right tried to turn left without looking, and took it into a large and supposedly well-regarded body shop for repairs. In hindsight, I should have known it wouldn't turn out well when they refused to give me a quote without seeing my insurance estimate first. To keep this short, suffice to say that they screwed it up. Charged for undercoating that wasn't applied, got cheap non-OEM replacement parts, ignored instructions to replace the fender, was okayed by the insurance company, and slathered a couple of pounds of Bondo on it instead, doing a miserable job of matching the contours, and myriad other screw-ups. Within a week of getting the car back from them, I'd returned with a long list of problems, quality complaints, and omissions. The general manager, found later he was the owner's nephew and had a rep for being an butthole, basically blew me off with a combination of indifference and rudeness. As to the quality complaints, he said, "Look, this car isn't worth putting Cadillac-level work into it. You want it done better, you'll have to pay us more money." I then did what most upset customers do, bad-mouth the company to anyone who would listen. Anytime I saw any car in need of bodywork, I'd warn the owner against this body shop, making my case by showing them the poor work done on my car. I continued doing this for at least 4 years, until I finally sold the car. The real revenge part was that about every 4 to 6 months, I'd call the shop and ask to speak to the GM. When I got him on the phone, I'd identify myself as a PO'd former customer and tell him that I'd saved a dozen or so people from his company's shoddy work, and I'd probably cost his shop about $10,000 or thereabouts. The first 2 calls he blew off. By the 4th call he was getting worried, and wanted my name and for me to come in so that we could come to an agreement and get you satisfied. I told him he had already blown his one chance to make good by insulting me when I came back to get him to do the job right. As to my name, I told him he could easily find it by going over his list of customers who'd come back with complaints about the work they'd done. I continued the calls even after I'd sold the car. For about 6 years or so, towards the end of that time, I'd point out to him that his attitude had potentially cost his company over $100,000 worth of work. On my last call, I actually got the owner. The nephew was on vacation, and spent a good 15 minutes on the phone with him explaining why I'd made it a 6-year mission to cost them as much business as I possibly could, and that his jerk of a GM had blown any chance of ever getting me to quit bad-mouthing them. I later heard from friends at a wrecking yard in the same town that the body shop had a new GM. The next one is titled, I Found Him. On June 18th, I was rear-ended by a grey Dodge Ram. I caught it on my dash cam, and the man who hit me appears on the video twice. I got a picture of his insurance card, damage done on both vehicles, and license plates. He told me he would like to take care of this out of pocket, as he didn't want his insurance rates to rise. I was okay with this. I've done it before with no issues. The next week, I sent my truck in for an estimate. Up until this, we had been texting back and forth with no issues. I emailed him a copy of the estimate, and communication stopped. After hearing nothing from him for 3 days, I called his insurance and filed a claim, because I'm not about to be jerked around. They came back in the same day, telling me he had stopped paying back in March, and so his insurance had been cancelled. They could not honor the claim. I was furious. I called and texted him relentlessly, with no response. He was not going to pay, and neither was his insurance, despite his insurance card saying it expired July 1st. I called my insurance, and even though I was at no fault, I have to pay $500 for repairs, deductible. I immediately went to the Denver County Court, and filed paperwork for small claims, then on to the Sheriff's Department to serve him paperwork. The police were no help, shocker. The address he provided on his insurance was falsified, and after telling the deputy 4 times to run his license plates, he finally did. The same address was used to register his vehicle. There was no other way we could find him, and so I was hopeless. I was going to pay for this dickhead's damage, and he was going to get away with it. Until this morning, I decided to do a few Google searches for his name, Denver. A rip-off review popped up. A man with the same name had redone a patio, and did a shitty job at it, fortunately for me. I thought I'd go ahead and call the company. I asked the receptionist for an estimate, consultation to do some yard work, and specifically requested name of Dickface, as I heard he was great at this stuff. She said he was great at landscaping, so I asked, he's the one who drives the grey Dodge truck, right? She said, yes. My heart stopped. That was all I needed. I called the deputy who was attempting to serve him, and they're currently on their way to serve the paperwork at his company. I ducking found you, you piece of crap, and I'm going to make sure you pay me. The court date is August 12th. I'll see you then. The next one is titled, Rude Neighbor Attacks Kids and Elderly with Sprinklers. My husband and I have lived in our house for about 8 years. There was a house at the end of our block that was lined with the prickly bushes, which often impeded the public sidewalk that many kids would have to take to get to the local school. I remember commenting to my husband that the people that live there must be super antisocial. About 3 years ago, I was walking with my 2 kids. My oldest was 7 and my youngest 18 months. We had decided to walk around the block with our dog. As we walk around the side of this house past the prickly bushes, the sprinklers to this house come on the other side that does not have prickly bushes, and the water sprayed my 18-mo directly in her face, eyes. She cried at first but was okay in the end. My first thought was, boy was that bad timing. And the second, how strange for them to be turning on sprinklers in the middle of a hot day. We were on water restrictions due to drought. We continued to walk around the block, and when we got back to our house, I had remembered how a couple people had told me stories of how this neighbor would turn on their sprinklers on purpose to get kids riding their bike or walking to school wet. I handed my 18 months off to my husband and decided to make another round around the block. Sure enough, as I approached their property line, still on the public sidewalk, their sprinklers turned back on and followed me as I rounded their property. Each zone would turn on right behind me. This was enough for me to get upset. They sprayed my newly walking toddler in the face and were clearly assaulting and targeting children. I tried to knock on their door but they would not answer, so I called the police. They needed to know this was unacceptable. As I stood there waiting, another neighbor approached walking their dog and told me how they cross the street and avoid this house altogether because they have had the sprinklers turned on them multiple times, and had even been yelled at through a window for walking their dog near the property. They also said they had turned on the sprinklers on an elderly couple that lived on the street too. The police came and spoke with the crotchety man and his wife. The PO told him that if he did it again, it would be considered assault and/or harassment and would involve his arrest. Next day, I want to preface this next part that our house had been struck by lightning the week before, so we had a roofing company out to make some repairs. I woke up early remembering we had not put out our trash bins for pickup. I went out the garage and as I was moving it to the edge of driveway, saw several long nails laying all over. Confused, I found and picked up all of them. Brand new shiny nails, exactly 20 in total. When the roofers showed up, I showed the head contractor and he was really confused. First off, they had only worked and parked from the front of the house and these nails were found in our driveway, back of house. We have alleyways where I live. He also showed me the nails they used and said these nails were not the right type of roofing nails for our roof. These were definitely not used or left by his crew. It dawned on me that this had to be the jerk neighbor. We didn't have cameras, so we could not prove anything. Cameras were installed by the end of that day. I decided this menacing jerk and his wife needed to be stopped. I got on our neighborhood Facebook page and posted my story about the sprinklers and suspicion on the roofing nails. I publicly shamed them for their behavior. Sure enough, after posting, I had over 60 comments from other neighbors also sharing their stories with the sprinklers, yelling, and about how their bushes had cut up kids' legs riding bikes, etc. Even his next door neighbor, a widow who had lost her husband, had stories of him throwing trash over her fence, and how he harassed her and her family when they had an in-home wake when her husband died. The wife saw the post and started going off about how I was spreading lies, but so many other people told her she was lying. I asked her outright to deny dropping nails in our driveway and she did not. They got so much crap about the situation, they decided to sell their house and move. Rumor has it the country house they were going to buy fell through and they were without home for a little while. I did not feel bad for them because karma's a witch. I also am now known as the lady that saved the neighborhood from the butthole on the corner. We also thought about throwing a goodbye neighborhood party when they were gone but opted not to be that petty. Happy ending, and the person that moved into the house is super nice and has been a positive contributing individual in our neighborhood. Also, he ripped out the bushes. Good riddance. The next one is titled, Your Potato Salad Belongs in the Trash. Part 1. So one day I am shopping at my usual supermarket. As I so often do, I have my headphones in, so I don't hear what's going on around me. I primarily rely on my eyes to notice what is happening. Anyway, there I was, all paid and putting my groceries into my bag, when suddenly a dripping cup of potato salad appears in front of my eyes. Dripping oily marinade into my bag and all over my groceries. I look up and see a red round angry face, RRAF, saying something to me. So I pop out a headphone. RRAF, ducking now. At this point I didn't realize one thing, he was speaking English. As you can tell by this single sentence, where I live we speak a different language, but as I speak and hear English almost all the time. I don't realize that at the moment. Me, huh? RRAF, this potato salad is leaking. Get me a new one. Right, ducking now, you lazy idiot. Me, why? His behavior hasn't really sunk in yet. RRAF, that's what you bag boys are supposed to do. You lazy idiot. Okay, now I have caught on. Me, hey butthole, I'm not a bag boy. RRAF, whatever you are, get me a new potato salad. Me, hey moron, I'm just shopping here. Which was when he saw the potato salad in my bag. RRAF, then just give me yours. Reaches for into my bag and forces his cup of potato salad into my hands. It's covered in marinade. He made a disgusted face and tossed it back into my carefully packed bag. Get me a new potato salad. I have had enough by then. I took my bag and walked into the store to dump his potato salad in a trash can. He turned even redder before I left the store. I can't even begin to rationalize how he could have reasonably thought that I was a bag boy. 1. Around here there are no bag boys. 2. I was a military-looking black jacket. The supermarket employees all wear red polos. 3. There were 2 other people packing their shopping bags. Part 2. Later that night as I arrived at my work I was introduced to my new manager, red round angry face. Well duck. Or not. His predecessor introduced him as the new, temporary manager, who would get the office into shape until a permanent manager would take over. Turns out I don't work there, but I do work for RRAF. Neither of them realize, those are code words, for me. I know the company's CEO and almost everyone directly underneath him, but there are a few layers of hierarchy between them and me. I am officially an independent contractor with a fixed hourly rate that is independent of my work time, date, night, and the office manager is supposed to call me in as necessary. My secret is, I am the company hitman. Due to the nature of the company, people in manager-level positions have very generous severance packages, unless they are fired for cause. I can see why they want to get rid of RRAF. Long story short, we both act as nothing happened, but he schedules me to work full night shifts for a month, which suits me perfectly fine given my hourly rate. The problem is, he was supposed to work these shifts instead of me. Strike 1. His computer doesn't properly log his weekly reports, because of a crappy security system. Usually I help people with that, but no luck. Company headquarters flags him as non-compliant. Strike 2. Finally, a month in he calls me into his office and tells me that I am fired. That my services were no longer needed. Never mind that I cannot be fired without authorization of the division manager. Strike 3. He was fired the day after. I was asked to supervise him clearing out his office and was probably grinning like a moron the whole time. The next one is titled, Getting My Neighbors Fined. In my previous apartment I lived on the bottom floor with 2 roommates. The girls who lived above me were really noisy, playing loud music at all hours of the night. Music doesn't really affect me much, but to my roommates it was really annoying. They called the office and one of the office workers asked them to quiet down as there was a complaint. A couple days later I heard really loud thumping and jumping from my ceiling. I can handle music but I don't like thumping noises. I went upstairs to ask them to quiet down. Their excuse was that one of them is a stripper so she was practicing, and that also because they're moving furniture. Whatever. I left my apartment for a couple of hours and when I came back the ceiling lamp had fallen from the ceiling. These apartments came with that lamp so we would have to pay for it if it's broken. When I asked my roommates what happened they said the girls above us were stomping so hard that it had broken off from the ceiling. They were in the room at the time so you can imagine how scary that is for the ceiling lamp to just fall out of nowhere. My roommates called maintenance to fix the lamp as well as called the office again. By now these girls knew that they were being too loud too late at night. I could see if it was the weekend but it would be during the week. So one night I decided to call the police because the office wasn't doing anything. I heard the officer speaking to them and they fed him the same excuse as they fed me. After he left they decided it would be funny to get back at me by stomping extremely loud. I knew that they were doing it on purpose because it was louder than it had ever been and it was more consistent. So I decided to record it to show the office proof. Turns out there's a fine for things like that in our lease agreement. I never had a problem with their noise again. The next one is titled, Keep Running Your Mouth About Doing Training. Okay, now you get to do them all. My friend Eve works for this big company in our area, and it happens to be state and federally funded, meaning all employees must follow and abide by both state and federal rules and regulations. So, Eve is on a team of 4 members, herself being one of them, and they all report to their boss, Mary. This team goes and do trainings of their own to help guide and teach others in the surrounding areas. Mary ultimately decides who goes to which trainings, when, where, but she is nice and usually lets the 4 of them talk and discuss amongst themselves who will do which trainings. All of this has been fine. However, Eve doesn't really like to do trainings because she is a shy person, and doesn't feel 100% comfortable speaking in front of a large group of people. Mary knows this. Rachel, another of Eve's team members, starts to complain about having to do so many trainings, on Saturdays in particular. Everyone knows this. Mary decides to start drawing names at random, so it's a bit more fair at who does which trainings. However, Rachel still complains. Here's where it starts to get interesting. Remember how I said they all need to follow the state and federal rules? Although Eve, Rachel and the other 2 members know all the information and material needed to host, do their own trainings, only poor Eve has not been certified through the state, making her ineligible to host, do any more trainings, regardless of what day they are on. Mary kind of doesn't care, because again, every member knows the information and material, and Mary has even hosted a few trainings with Eve, and has seen that Eve is 100% fine hosting trainings, even though she's shy about it. Rachel is still complaining about herself having to do so many trainings, especially on Saturdays. So, here is Rachel, hosting a training, and the people that are attending are people she's seen before, trained before, worked with before. So she feels a bit comfortable to, vent out her frustrations about having to do so many trainings all the time, how she is always stuck doing ones on Saturday, which isn't 100% true, and how her boss has people who aren't certified doing the trainings as well. Well, little did Rachel know that some of the people she was training happened to also personally know her boss, and one of them was Mary's boss, Abigail. So, Abigail and a few others decide to email Mary directly during Rachel's training to let Mary know, hey, Rachel informs us that you have uncertified personal hosting trainings? Yay, that needs to be rectified immediately. So, Eve gets a phone call from Mary, knowing Eve doesn't like to do trainings, hey, you are not in trouble, but I just wanted to let you know of a situation. Since you are not certified through the state, you are not able to do any more trainings. Eve, trying not to jump for joy, oh no. Well, okay then. Just wondering, may I ask what happened for this to change? Mary, oh, so, you know how Rachel has been complaining about doing trainings? Well, she decided to run her mouth off at the last one she was hosting, and informed my boss and countless others that I'm allowing uncertified personnel to host trainings. Eve, oh, okay. I see. Mary, so, because she did that, I'm just letting you know again, you are not in trouble, but you can't do them anymore. And also, because she did that, I'm going to be calling her next to let her know that what she did made our team 1 member smaller from hosting future meetings, and because she did that, she will now be hosting every training that is scheduled for a Saturday. Eve, trying not to laugh, okay, thank you for letting me know. Take care. The last one is titled, Sell Me a Car with a Wrecked Engine? I wreck with your gay lover. I'm a classic car nut. I was born into a family that held onto 70s land yachts well into the early 2000s as daily drivers, and I turned out to be a Mopar, Chrysler, Plymouth, Dodge nut. Our story starts a few days into the acquisition of a new project car, when I discovered an expensive stainless steel pocket wallet under the passenger's side of the bench seat. Inside was a foreign driver's license and credit cards, all currently and very recently active, recent gas receipts, a US $5 bill, and business cards of ritzy art dealers from the Florida Keys. After some quick Google and Facebook research, I realized these belonged to the gay lover of the guy who sold me the car. Okay, fine, I don't hold that against him. However, that same day, I also discovered that the engine, which the seller claimed to have been rebuilt, had 3 cylinders with next to nothing compression from bad rings *. How convenient that the muffler and tailpipe were rotted out when I took it around the block. It was very hard to listen to anything going on under the hood. In short, I either have to rebuild the entire engine, or find another one. To add insult to injury, I also found that the alternator mounting threads in the left head were stripped clean, with epoxy holding the bolt in place, plus a number of other obvious cover-ups that contradicted what I was told by the seller. Needless to say, I wasn't too happy with the lying sob who sold me the car. Given the bum engine, I wound up paying pretty hefty for a project car in need of half a drivetrain. So, the next day, I ran his boy toy's driver's license and credit cards through a shredder, listed, and later sold the stainless wallet on eBay, and spent the $5 at Advanced Auto. Karma, baby. Thanks for listening.